Hello, today I want to talk about what's new in Ventuz 8. Firstly, I will give you a short overview about the new features and about the key changes, and after that we will jump directly together into the Ventuz Designer where it will show you live a couple of these new features. The first new feature is the new launcher, which is basically a new application which allows you to have all the important things together in one place, like the license manager. You can start a runtime project, save projects, you can access the configuration and stuff like that. They implemented a new feature like the scene control window inside the Ventuz Designer, which basically allows you to have access to all your MIDI nodes, OSC nodes, keyboard input output nodes in one place. They improved the color management and HDR workflow. They also improved the in-scene editing tools like 2D guides, which I also will show you very soon inside the designer. They also have a pretty cool new feature, which is called project documentation or project reports, which allows you to create basically a project documentation for each project with a very simple markdown language so that other developers or even your customer can read that inside the designer. They made some improvements to the movie clip node, which means they supporting now the Apple ProRes. And they have a new node that's called the cloner node, which is a very powerful alternative to the old spreader node or even sometimes to the particle system. And they also made some updates to the web browser node, which is based now on Chromium version 1.2.7. The key changes in Ventuz 8 is now that they are based on .NET 8, which means a better performance, and of course it's future proof. They also made a couple of improvements or implemented a couple of new boards, SDI, NDI boards and drivers, which basically means they are more supported hardware for capture boards or HDMI, SDI. They improved the scripting. And they also changed the JSON parsing from the old Newtonsoft.json implementation to the new system.text.json. Let's jump together into the designer now. So let's start to open the Ventuz 8 launcher, and I will give you a live demonstration what you can do here in the Ventuz 8 launcher. So here on the top you have tabs like the project browser, configuration, the live and learning, right? And every time you select a different tab here, the left side menu will change. For here in your project browser, you can see they sorted basically by Ventuz projects, by Ventuz presentations, and by Ventuz shows for the director. Down here, you have a button where you can check for software updates. I'm running on the latest now already. I just made an update a couple of hours ago. And down here, you can open your license manager and things like that. Down here, you have also access to the user manual and so on, right? If we swap here or click here to the configuration, then you can see here that left side menu changed. So we have here the status of my Studio PC 1 here, right, where we can see the different IP addresses, all that stuff. We can change the machine name. We can put it into groups or can give it different IDs basically, or even a tag. Over here, we can access then and create the machine configurations, right? So right now I have here two configurations, right? 3 screens and 4K screen. We also have access to the device configuration and to the render setup, which is bound to projects as in the version before. If we change here to our live tab, then we also have here the status, like pretty much the same like we have in the configuration, but you can see that changes here. So this live tab is basically only accessible when a runtime or presentation or the designer is open, right? Because then you can access, for example, here the scene control, right? Which allows you to remote control a Ventuz scene, which is also very, very nice. It's a kind of a remoting. You can access here the project data, of course, the live options, and you can access the diagnostics. And here in that last tab, the learning tab, you have basically access to all the content, example projects or tutorials which Ventuz provides now directly over this new Ventuz launcher. To create a new project, you simply go to your project browser and then you simply press here new project. And as you can see that the create new project wizard is pretty much the same like it was before, except now you have here a couple of more options, like you can choose your color space, for example, right? I already created a project for this, so I think that's okay. So if you want to start a project, or if you don't find your project here, you simply go here to my projects, right? And then you can see everything, because by default he's jumping here always to the recent. And maybe if you want to open a project which you didn't open for a while, then it's maybe not available here, so you have to go down here to my projects, or even here, yes, to your own category, what you also can create. So we are now in our designer scene, and the next feature I want to show you is here our scene control window. That's very new, and as you can see, if you are here under the logic view layout, basically, then the scene control window is here directly. If you don't see that, you also have access to it over here, right, where you simply can turn it on or off. What this is doing, as you can see, you have here basically a couple of buttons where you can sort it by templates, by animations, by transitions, by keyboard control, OSC, DMX, MIDI, GPIO, serial, and TCP network, right? Just give you a quick idea how that works. Let's say I create here now a new empty scene, and inside here I create a Windows key, and let's make that my spacebar, and let's create another one, and this one is, for example, my R key for whatever, a reset event, right? As soon as I do that, you can see here directly, if I select here my keyboard control category, then they appear immediately. I am also able to trigger them from here now, right? So if I press here, then you can see, if I press my R key, I selected here my Windows keynote R, then you can see if I click here, then the keys also get triggered, or the node gets triggered from here, as well the other way around, right? If I press spacebar, then you can see it gets triggered here. If I press my R key, it gets triggered here as well, right? And of course, the same is working with, for example, OSC. Let's create here some OSC output, and whatever I send here to myself, 127.0.1, and to the address, let's call it test. And then I need an OSC input to receive that, and I want to receive that on test, right? So if I go now to my OSC, you can see I have here my input and my output. If I press test, right, then nothing happens, because this is actually not a button, right? So I have basically to create some trigger, right? So I basically have to trigger this one here, right? So as you see, if I press here test on my OSC output, it arrives also at my input, right? So let's say I bind my space bar here to my key down, and I go to my output, and now I press space, then you can see the input and the output OSC gets triggered. So that's very, very handy if you have complex scenes with a lot of data flows, OSC signals, events going from up to down, from left to right. So with this, you really can quickly find something, because if I want to find my Windows key, for example, I simply have to press this navigate button, yeah, and then it will jump directly to my node wherever it is in my scene. And of course, this will work for OSC, for DMX, for MIDIs, for GPIO serial, and TCP IP. The next new feature I want to show you are the 2D guides. To access the 2D guides, you simply go here to your view, and you open up here the guides, and then you can see it will appear over here, right? Let me make that a bit larger. So by default, you don't see anything, but what you can do, basically, you can create vertical and horizontal lines in your viewport, right? That helps a lot for align elements, buttons, or images, or text nicely, right? To do that, you simply click here to add guide, and you also have to turn on here this little eye symbol. And if you see, maybe it's not really, you cannot see it in the movie, but if I turn it on, you can see here we have now a very small or thin white line. This is now a horizontal top down. I can change it here. Yeah, I can change here the percentage, and here on the very right side you can see this is now aligned to the top. If I left click here, now it's aligned to the center. Let's bring that back to 0%. If I click here again, now it's aligned to the bottom. So let's say I want to have one horizontal center line, so I simply click here as long as this is in the center right? So 2 times. Now I have a white center line. I also can change the group color here. So for example, if I want to have that red, yeah, so now we have that red line here, or let's make it even white again. And now let's say if you want to change this from horizontal to vertical, you simply right click here, right? And with that right click, he simply swap basically the lines. We also can add more guides. So I want to have one vertical and one horizontal. And as you can see, now we have exactly what I want. So the next thing I want to show you is how you can create a project documentation. So I'm back now here in my Ventuz Launcher. And if I select here now my Ventuz 8 project, then you can see down here, I have directly access to the documentation. Yes, and this documentation I created by myself, and I will show you how you can do that for your own project, right? So as you can see, I have here a header one, I have here some larger text, some descriptions, right? Basically the script, what I kind of use to create this this YouTube movie, right? And stuff like that. If I move a little bit more down, then you can see this is that markdown language, which you also can find on the Ventuz user manual in the documentation on the website, where they in details explain how you can use that simple markdown language. And of course, you also simply can use just the HTML file. Okay, to do that, I have to create a new project. And let me do that quickly. Let's say project documentation. So now we are in our designer, in our newly created project documentation project. We have to do one thing if you want to create your own project documentation, basically, right? So what we have to do, we have to go to our documentation folder in our Ventuz project. To access that, we have now here that file menu, and we can say open containing folder. And then we are here in our Windows Explorer. And over here, you can see that documentation folder is empty. We created this new project. If I close this project now, then Ventuz will create a default project documentation, basically, simply with your project name, the email address, and all that stuff we created there, basically. That's default. And Ventuz is always doing that if you close the project, right? So that's why we don't see anything here. If you want to create basically your own project documentation, you have to create a file here called index.md. So to do that, I simply create here a text file and delete everything and call it index.md. Once I do that, yes, that's okay. I'm happy. And now you can see here in the designer directly that new window project documentation opens. If you can't see that, then you simply go here to view and you click here show project documentation. Right now it's closed, and now again show project documentation. And let's bring up quickly our folder, because one more thing happened, and that's that index.html. Yeah, Ventuz created this index.html, right? So if you want to change something now, or if you want to create your own project documentation, from now on, you simply have to click this little pen. Then basically my default text editor or code editor will open. In my case, it's VS Code. And now I simply can start to typing things here. If I just say test, text, and I press Ctrl S or save it, then you can see this text appears directly over here. If I make a second line, hello, everyone, and Control S, then you can see this appears here as well. Now I will show you a little bit of that markdown language, a very simple markdown language. Of course, you also can simply use HTML if you want so, but for example, if I make one dash here and I say my documentation, so this will basically make a H1 headline, right? So I press Ctrl S and then you can see my documentation. After that, I want to have H2. I simply make 2 of that guys, and then I say here's some examples for markdown. Control S. Yeah. And then you can see he will make here H2 and so on. Some other cool stuff what we can do is, for example, if you want to have bullet points, you simply make the minus and then you say topic 1, for example, topic 1, add another one, topic 2, and topic 3, Control S, and then you can see now we have here a nice layout for our project documentation. We also can do something like checkboxes. Yeah, this is then minus, and then we have here the brackets. Sorry, not this brackets with space. This would be task 1. Save that, right? And now you can see we have here task 1. We also can do lines, yeah, dividers basically. That's simply 3 times the dash or the minus. Then you can see now he created this. If we want to have the task done, then we simply put an X here. And then you can see over here we have that checked basically. So this is a pretty nice tool to document your projects inside Ventuz, right? And of course also make it accessible for people's directly in the designer. Of course, you also can open the index.html file in any web browser. The last feature I want to show you is the cloner node. To do that, I simply bring in here a cloner node. And first we bring it in, nothing will happen. Let me also add here a cube. And let's bring that in. And now maybe let's change here our cloner node here to something interesting, for example, to a grid. And let's also bring an axis in front of the cube, and let's make it a bit smaller because now you can see what the cloner is actually doing. So he's creating now a grid 5 by 5 by 5. Let me also add here quickly an orbit that I can rotate it a bit with the mouse to make it touch interactive. We have to select our cloner node and we have to enable touch here. And now you can see now we have here that cloned cube 5 by 5 by 5. And of course here you have different options basically how you want to do it. I mean, this is not a tutorial about this cloner node. This is really just to show you that new features. Check it out on your own or wait until I make the new tutorial movie about this, which will also happen pretty soon. And of course, now you can say we can put it here for, let's say, 20 by 20 by 20, right? So with this one, we have now 8,000 cubes basically, which did not affect the performance of my CPU too much. That max clones are basically you can adjust here, so it's now locked to 10,000, but you also can bring it up to 100,000, a million, or 10 million. I actually tried it with a million and it crashed actually pretty quickly. So yeah, because that was really hardcore stress testing. But I think 100,000 with the machine what I have should not be a big issue. So let's try that. Let's give it maybe a try. Let's make 0.5, just a bit smaller. And then now let's increase that guys here to, let's make it 40, 40, 40. So that's still okay. I think 50, 50, 50 is then over our 100,000, right? And you can see that, for example, if I make more in one direction, then another direction will basically here the set one will lose resolution, right? Because it will basically cut off at that max clones, right? So if we make here 40 by 40 by 40, we should still be under 100,000. And of course, then down here in your cloner, you also have access to modifiers. So let's add here, for example, a modifier, a random position. Simply, let's say the translate X and Y and Z. I want to adjust a little bit. And then, of course, if you change that, you have to also enable here that randomize, right? And now you can see that maximum would be, they randomize basically the values in X, Y, and Z. And of course, I also can add here more randomization in the rotations axis and things like that. Maybe let's bevel that cube a little bit. And now you can see, now we have a very nicely randomized cube with a couple of, yeah, not 100,000, but maybe 67, 80. I'm lazy to calculate now exactly cubes. That's basically it for this. If you have more questions, please write it down in the comments and I will try to go on with our further tutorials about all these new nodes. Until then, bye bye.